We're really excited to be here today to talk a little bit about our new research projects related to reading in kids with high-functioning autism. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of people who work on these projects, so none of this is done alone. We have big groups of very talented co-investigators and graduate students and postdoctoral researchers on multiple sites. And I'll give you a visual of some of those people in this slide. And also just to recognize that none of this work happens without funders, and we have been very grateful to have funding for them from the U.S. Department of Education. And also, for the study that we're going to talk about toward the end of this talk, we have a gift from a family, a private donation from a family to help develop our center for kids with high-functioning autism and reading. And that's the Cornett Family Fund. So I want to talk a little bit about just some background here and maybe a little bit about how we got here. First, I just want to say this is sort of an emerging field. There's not a lot of literature out there on how to best intervene with kids who have high-functioning autism and reading. There's been a few literature reviews, but there's really no large-scale studies that look at this, and so we are trying our best to begin this process, and we are learning a lot. We learn a lot, I think, every week that we are working in the center, and so we're starting, so we're not going to be able to tell you this is what works, even though I know everybody wants to know what works, but we're going to be able to describe what we're starting to do and what we're starting to see in the students. I also just want to say that when you start a project like this, you kind of have to start somewhere. And my background is in working with kids who have reading disability, who struggle with both decoding and comprehension. And so our literature base really starts there. It starts with kids with reading disability. And we were looking at how to best intervene with, how we know to best intervene with those kids and applying that to kids who have autism. And we're very aware that this is not going to be a perfect match. And so a lot of what we're doing right now is looking at, we know that this works for kids with decoding problems or comprehension problems, but how do we need to adapt that for kids with autism? And then the other thing I just want to say is that I personally, and I think our entire team, is very concerned about developing interventions that can be used in classroom settings. I worked in schools, I did intervention in schools, and I realized that a lot of different things happen in schools. Schools can be crazy places. But there's really no point to develop interventions that aren't feasible to be implemented in school settings, because we realize that not everyone can come to a clinic, and we also realize that most of our kids with high-functioning autism are being served in general education settings. So that's sort of just a little bit of background to show you, to talk about where we're coming from. So I do want to talk a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about the reading disability literature, and I talk about this because when Nancy comes up and talks later, you're going to see that a lot of the symptomatology that we're seeing in kids with autism really mirrors what we see with kids in reading disability, and they're struggling in sort of the same areas. And so we're going back to the reading disability literature to look at what that says. So a little bit about reading disabilities. There seems to be myths out there that the fundamental cause of reading disability is a deficit in visual processing. Some people think that dyslexia is kids see letters backwards or in the wrong order. And really, that's not the case. What the literature has shown is that dyslexia is a phonological processing deficit, and it has to do with connection between sounds and letters on the page. Another myth is that reading achievement that is significantly lower in cognitivity is indicative of a presence of a reading disability. So not all kids who struggle in reading have a reading disability, and I think we know this. But some kids maybe are not receiving the best instruction in the general education setting and have struggle in reading. That doesn't mean they all have a reading disability. And I also do want to say that that could be the case with some of our kids with high-functioning autism. We're not saying that they all have a reading disability. But it may be that they aren't able to access the general education curriculum in the same way as typically developing kids, and we're trying to figure out ways to sort of combat that. And then the other thing is that poor readers with and without IQ achievement discrepancy differ in their performance on word recognition and decoding tasks. If you look at the old, sort of what we call the old way of identifying kids with reading disability, which is this IQ discrepancy formula, and you look at kids who don't have the IQ discrepancy formula, it turns out that they perform on the reading tasks in basically the same way. So when you're thinking about which groups to intervene with, there are some people who make the argument that this IQ discrepancy formula isn't really that important. I said that every individual with a reading disability, everyone with a reading problem does not have a disability. And the other myth is that placement in special education classrooms improves reading performance for students identified with a reading disability. This has really not to be shown in the literature. And some of my work in general education classrooms is really to help prepare teachers to provide what we call Tier 2 or supplemental reading intervention for their most at-risk kids, so for the 25% of the kids who are at the bottom of the class in reading, and really getting them up to speed on how we can intervene in the general education classroom, because it turns out that sending these kids to a resource room is not always the best intervention, the best idea. A little bit about reading disability affects at least 80% of the learning disabled population. There's more empirical evidence regarding the cause, course, and effect of treatment for dyslexia than any other learning disability. So we're kind of good. We know what to do with kids with reading disability if they have dyslexia, if they have a decoding problem. There's been, over the last 30 years, a lot of literature in this area. What we're not so good at is intervening with kids who have comprehension difficulties. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how those things are different. Those could be two different types of reading disability in a minute. And we know that there's now consensus that phonologically based processes constitute the core deficit in individuals with developmental dyslexia. So profiles of individuals with reading disability. About 12.5 million children struggle with some aspect of reading, so that's nearly 20% of all school-age children. So it is a big group of kids across the country. We know that kids who are poor readers at the end of first grade tend to be poor readers at the end of elementary school. And 75% of poor readers who are not identified until third grade never catch up, regardless of the length and type of intervention. So all of this to say that early intervention is really important, but to be able to target the kids that really need intervention, you also have to have really good early assessment. And we're pretty good at this in the decoding area. Again, we're not so good at it in comprehension. So when I talk about subgroups of reading disability, there are generally two large subgroups. One is the developmental dyslexia group, which I think a lot of people hear about. This is a decoding issue that's related to phonological processing, and we think it's about 5 to 10% of the total population have developmental dyslexia. And when we do intervention with that particular population, we usually see response in most of the kids. In the studies that I've been involved in, we typically see no response, and when I say no response, I mean no growth in decoding in about 1 to 2% of the population, depending on the study. So if you do intensive intervention in decoding, you can see some improvement. For poor comprehenders, it's a group of kids who are really good readers. They can decode, and they have a really hard time understanding what they're reading. And this is the one that puzzles a lot of people. And also, when I talk to classroom teachers, it's the one that they have the most difficulty with, because teaching comprehension is not an easy task. And so that's really where my research has focused, is developing comprehension in kids who are struggling in that area. And also developing teacher skills in how to intervene with their kids in their classroom settings in the areas of comprehension. So another way to look at this is that there are different types of readers. We have individuals who have good language comprehension processes and good word recognition would be considered good readers. We have individuals who have good language comprehension processes but poor word recognition, and we would consider these kids dyslexic or have dyslexia. And that's also something that's very important about kids with dyslexia. They typically have very advanced vocabularies and very advanced oral language. And so when you speak to them or you talk to them, you wouldn't guess that this kid has a reading disability. but they have a very hard time processing the phonemes within words. Kids who have poor language comprehension but good word recognition, we would call hyperlexic or poor comprehenders. And this, a lot of the literature that we looked at, maybe not the literature, but there had been a thought that maybe this is where our kids with high functioning autism would land, that they are really good decoders but poor comprehenders. And it turns out, Nancy's going to talk about this a little bit later, that they're not all like that. We do have kids in the HF, the high functioning autism group, who have a dyslexia profile. And then we have these poor kids. I always feel bad for them because we don't have a good name for them. We call them garden variety poor readers. So they are poor comprehenders, and they're also they have poor decoding. And so you would see issues in both places. So for developmental dyslexia, I talked a little bit about this, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker, is that it's domain specific, it's a phonological core hypothesis that it's a phonological processing deficit, and that the chief problem is that the children have difficulty acquiring accurate fluent word skills, so word level reading skills, but they have average oral language abilities. For poor comprehenders, sometimes these kids are referred to as our late emerging reading disabled group. And this is in the literature, but I tend to argue with this only because I don't think they just all of a sudden at 3rd and 4th grade have a comprehension issue. I think that we are really not good at assessing comprehension in K1 and 2, and all of a sudden in 3rd grade when these kids are really required to take the books and read them and learn from text, we say, wait a second, they don't know what they're reading. And this has been happening the whole time. So a lot of my work in intervention with the comprehension has been how do we develop these skills in K1 and 2 so that when they get to 3rd grade, we don't all of a sudden say, hey, wait, there's a reading disability here. Because the literature really shows that if you wait that long to identify these reading disabilities, they have a very hard time catching up. And we do not get good effect sizes and reading interventions beyond 4th and 5th grade. It's very, very difficult. So poor comprehenders would have normal phonological processing. They would be fluent readers. They have deficits in receptive vocabulary and semantic processing. Sometimes have difficulty with spoken discourse, so some of the oral language stuff. And I have seen in my data, and some other people have shown that they have deficits in listening comprehension very early. And so when we do our work, we often assess kids on listening comprehension in kindergarten and 1st grade as a screen for if they're going to have comprehension difficulties later in reading, because they're very highly correlated, the relationship between listening and reading comprehension. So a little bit about reading comprehension development. If you work in the schools, for a while you knew what Reading First was. And the model for Reading First was that if kids had good phonological processing and good alphabet knowledge, they would be fluent readers and they would magically comprehend what they're reading. Which seems to be a really good model for a lot of kids, but it's just not for all kids. Because there's a whole lot of other things that go into reading comprehension, including vocabulary and oral language, knowledge of syntax, and working memory and executive control. There's a lot going on. In my work sometimes, and then also this whole listening comprehension thing, which people don't talk that much about, but when I started going down this road of really interested in comprehension intervention, I was saying to myself, well, can't we do this through language comprehension and through listening comprehension, even before kids are reading? Because we have to be intervening before they can decode accurately. And then a lot of my work is also with kids who speak more than one language, and so then you have all these other things going in, all these other variables. You have their first language and second language, listening comprehension, oral vocabulary. There's a whole bunch of things moving around here. And another way to look at this is Scarborough's model of fluent reading. So I present it in both ways because some people like one, some like the other. And basically, there's language comprehension, there's word recognition, which includes phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. And there's also language comprehension, which include all of these other things. And all of these things have to work together to be able to be a fluent reader and to understand what you're reading. So when we first were talking about, I arrived at UC Davis right when Peter Mundy had received this IAS grant to do this longitudinal project looking at reading development in kids with high-functioning autism. And they were just assessing, and Nancy's going to talk about those results later. It was interesting because I sat down with Nancy and she said, well, what do we need to assess? And I probably gave her like 50 different things that they had to assess, because a lot of the studies that we were looking at weren't assessing all of these different parts of comprehension. And if you don't do that, then it's very difficult to then go in and develop an intervention that's going to target where the deficits are, right? You have to have knowledge of where the different deficits are. And also because the literature was talking about, well, we just think that these kids with high functioning autism really have a comprehension issue. But I urged that we needed to collect a whole range of reading data, not just sort of the higher level stuff, and it turns out that there's some interesting data there on the word level, phonological awareness, and word reading stuff. So what we know about factors that affect reading comprehension, proficient comprehender text is influenced by accurate and fluent word reading skills, oral language skills, the extent of your conceptual and factual knowledge about what you're reading, knowledge and skill and use of cognitive strategies to improve comprehension, and to repair it when it breaks down. And I apologize, it's hard to read. This is really important, to repair it when it breaks down. Because a lot of kids will be reading, and adults too, I mean, I do this sometimes, and I will get to the end of the passage and I will say, what did I just read? But I know, because I'm a skilled reader, that I have not comprehended what I just read, and I will go back. But a lot of when we did some questioning when we first started developing our comprehension intervention, kids weren't even realizing when they weren't comprehending. So we are pretty explicit in our instruction about this. And we have an entire unit in our instruction toward the end of it that's called monitoring meaning. And so they are taught skills to be able to understand what they're reading and to be able to repair that when then something breaks down, to be able to go back and repair it. And reasoning and inferential skills. This is another big part, is being able to make inferences about text. And we're just sort of embarking on this adventure with our kids with high-functioning autism. We've done a couple weeks instruction with kids on sort of direct recall of facts, which seemed to go pretty well. But once you get into some of the background knowledge and being able to use what you know to make inferences about text, it becomes much more difficult. And you can imagine that reading is a social process, right? Understanding narratives is a social thing. And so this may be a bigger issue for kids with high-functioning autism than it is for kids with just with reading disability. And we're starting to be able to think about how we need to change these curriculums to address that unique issue in kids with autism. And the other thing that's often not talked about is motivation, right? If kids aren't interested in what they're reading, it becomes very hard to do any sort of comprehension intervention or anything like that. And if they're interested in what they're reading, they're more likely to comprehend what they're reading because they're paying attention and all those things that happen. So all this is to say that there's three big stumbling blocks: difficulty learning to read words, insufficient vocabulary and general knowledge, and an absence of motivation to read. A little bit about how we identify kids with learning disability. Right now, the state has two different ways to do it. One is a severe discrepancy model, and the other is response to intervention. I've done a lot of work in response to intervention. Right after I finished school, I was in Pennsylvania. I did a postdoc there and implemented RTI in about 20 different schools, and that was a huge challenge. So we talk about this only because kids with autism may, to get the services that they need in the schools related to reading, it may be that we need to go through this identification process for reading disability also and see where they are fall on this spectrum. So the IQ discrepancy model basically means you have a normal IQ, but your reading level is much lower than expected. And so at that point, you would, because you have a normal function IQ, you have lower reading than is expected, you would receive interventions or be identified as reading disabled. The problem with this is that this is often called the wait to fail model, because often it's really difficult to identify these kids till 3rd grade. Right? And I hear a lot from schools, well, we don't even identify kids with reading disability until 3rd grade. And I say, well, that's a problem because you really need to be intervening in 1st grade, kindergarten and 1st grade. And this is, we suspect, is also true with our kids with high-functioning autism. And it also fails to consider outside factors such as inconsistent instruction in the general education classroom. And the severe discrepancy that you find doesn't really provide any useful information about where you need to intervene. Right? There's a discrepancy, and that's great and fine, and we know that, but it doesn't provide a whole lot of information on targeted intervention. And also, the biggest issue is that it really lacks uniformity across states. Every state does this differently, and in fact, every district does this differently. I once had a client who was in the LA unified area and was diagnosed as reading disabled, and they went to the next district over, and all of a sudden they were not reading disabled because the discrepancy wasn't enough for that particular district. So they didn't get their services. So the other way that we do this is through RTI, and we look at reading disabled as kids who are not responded to good instruction. And the assumption is if the child does not respond to instruction that's effective for the vast majority of children, then they need something else. So if they're in the general education classroom and they're not getting, and their reading performance is not improving, this is for all kids, including our kids with high-functioning autism, they're going to need something else. But another assumption here that I think is really important to talk about is that a huge assumption of RTI is that the general education curriculum is effective, or else you're going to over-identify kids who need intervention at the secondary level, right? Because if the general education instruction is not effective, then there may be a ton of kids who appear to have a reading issue, but it might just be that the general education curriculum is not working for multiple reasons. So this is usually what we look at. Tier 1 is general education. All students are here. Tier 2 is about 15 to 20%, sometimes up to 25% of students who are struggling in reading or any other academic area. And Tier 3 are the kids who, even after intensive instruction here in Tier 2, are not responding and go into Tier 3. And so the interventions that we're developing are really right here, right now, Tier 2. And we've developed them for both kids who are struggling with reading, and also we're starting to develop here for kids who have high-functioning autism. Okay? And my work in the general education classroom is really training teachers about how they can do this Tier 2 instruction in their classroom, not in a pull-out model, but in their classroom for kids who are struggling with reading. And sometimes this is referred to as, there are analogies to a medical model I'm not going to go over because I think most people understand that you move up through the tiers and you get more and more intervention as you go up. So just a little bit about early intervention and why we're stressing this, the early part of this is that I have some data from some other people's studies and then a little bit from mine. We know that kids who start off low in the school year and those who start off average, if they don't receive any intervention across the year, the kids who are low are not responding to the general education curriculum here at all. So across the school and across grade levels. And the same for growth in word reading ability. And the same in comprehension here. So you see those kids who are starting off average really responding to that general education curriculum and they're taking off. And then you have kids here and the discrepancy between the two groups grows over time. And that's what we're trying to have not happen. And so a little bit about some data that I have on comprehension. Kids who are low risk for early screening as they go through the school year. So these kids, we tested them at the beginning and they did not show any risk factors and we kind of knew that they were going to be good readers. These kids are kids who are high risk for early screening across the grade levels. This group right here are kids who have a research-based core curriculum, so a research-based, evidence-based Tier 1 general education core curriculum, but did not receive extra instruction, and they were at risk at the beginning of the year. So they didn't receive any sort of extra instruction, they only received Tier 1 instruction, general education. And these are the kids who are at the same place here in the lower grades, and over the years, they got a research-based core curriculum with also the Tier 2 supplemental instruction. So we can show that for most of the kids, like I said, about 1 to 2%, it's hard, we don't see a response. But on average, we do see a response to those really targeted Tier 2 interventions. So we see growth. So early intervention is important. I think I've talked about that already. It takes, the NICHG had a report come out that shows that it takes 4 times as long to intervene in the 4th grade as it does in the late kindergarten years for kids with reading difficulties. And we also know that we are pretty good, if with effective and an evidence-based curriculum and intervention, we're pretty good at teaching decoding. So we show that between 70 and 90% of at-risk students can learn to decode later in the average range, even when they start at risk. If it is implemented correctly and with intensity in school settings, that can be overcome. But the big hole here in the literature and what we're trying to address is the comprehension piece, because just because you teach kids how to read does not mean that they're comprehending what they read. And why is this such a big deal? Well, there's instructional time concerns in the classroom, especially for teachers who are following a very structured curriculum. If they are required to follow a very structured curriculum where they have to be teaching certain things on certain days for a certain amount of time, and that curriculum doesn't have comprehension in it, and most of our K-1-2 curriculum in Gen Ed does not have a whole lot of comprehension in it, then they don't have time to do it. And it's difficult. Teaching comprehension is really difficult. This has been a challenge for us to get teachers to think about comprehension early. So we know word reading fluency is necessary but not sufficient grounds for reading comprehension, and we know that there's a strong relationship between listening and reading comprehension. So our work is really in this area. So if we know that there's a strong relationship between listening and reading comprehension, can we teach those comprehension skills early before kids are reading?
So my work has really been anchored in the autism research field from the beginning, and I learned a lot from Dr. Solari about the reading piece and trying to merge the research between my mentor, Dr. Mundy, and Emily, so that we can understand more about a field that, as she referred to earlier, is really not completely developed. However, we do know that there's a problem, and there have been a number of studies of varying sample sizes that show that anywhere between 33 and 65% of their samples have a reading problem specific in the comprehension area. But it really depends. It depends on how large the sample is. It depends on the level of symptomatology. It depends on intellectual ability and all sorts of things. And so a lot of these studies are not very well controlled for those things. However, we do know from looking at some of these early studies that there are some factors that are very important to consider. And as Dr. Solari was talking about, one of them is oral language. So one of the things that these studies have been showing is that in children with autism spectrum disorders, reading comprehension and higher order language skills, so I'm going to refer to things like listening comprehension, inference ability, the ability to process things at more a gist level rather than just remembering individual details. I'm going to refer that as higher order language or cognitive processing. And they find that those particular abilities align with structural language skills. And when I'm talking about structural language, I'm talking about the phonological properties of language, the morphemic properties, so the smallest parts of words that have meaning, like prefixes, suffixes, root words, those are morphemes. Your syntax, so how you use the order of words in a sentence in order to convey different meanings, and semantics or vocabulary. The other thing, though, that we really need to consider are aspects of having a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorders, because you have to think about social communication, social interaction, and functioning. And there were a couple great studies that were just starting to give us some hints that there are statistically significant connections between different ways of assessing autism spectrum characteristics and their reading comprehension. So these two things basically formed my initial research questions for my dissertation, actually. So this is a diagram that is, I guess, another way to think, for me to think about the different factors that contribute to successful reading comprehension. First, we have the word reading and decoding, just as Emily was talking about. Oral language, so that was I was discussing earlier, both structural aspects of oral language and higher order language and cognitive processing. Executive function, which isn't quite as bold because I'm not going to talk about that as much today, but certainly things like attention and working memory are extremely important. And then here's the social communication piece. And I may refer to this a little bit more, but the idea of looking at word reading and decoding and the oral language piece together that Emily showed, also Dr. Scarborough's excellent model, is just in the literature called the simple view of reading. All right, so our study is, I was very fortunate to be working with Dr. Mundy as we got this large grant that Dr. Solari was talking about, and it just happened to be the time I was writing my prospectus for my dissertation. So we wound up recruiting 125 children. They were between the ages of 8 and 16 the first time we met them. We are just now seeing all of them for their third and final visit 3.5 years later. The kids in the sample that I will be talking about today, they do not have intellectual disabilities. They're all English proficient speakers. And I'm going to split this into two groups. The two groups are matched on age, grade, and mother's level of education, which is a factor to consider when you're trying to understand literacy development. So we have 81 children in the high-functioning autism sample. Just kind of interesting little stats on them. 93% have an IEP or 504 plan, probably not surprising. But 80% spend most of their day in inclusive general education settings. Only 11% were attending special day, and we had a couple children that were homeschooled. Then we have a typically developing control sample of 44 children, and we actually had a couple that had a 504 plan, and I believe that was actually for reading disability. And we actually had a third group that I'm not going to talk about as much today, but we have a sample of 40 children who have a diagnosis of ADHD. Okay, so here's our sample. On average, they were 11 years old, 5th grade. You can see we tried really hard to recruit an IQ matched sample, but a lot of our typically developing kids came from Davis. And so all the analyses I show you, we statistically control for differences in IQ. But I did want you to see that the autism sample is very high functioning average range. The ADOS, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the ADOS. See some nodding. It's a part of the clinical assessment for autism spectrum disorders. And all the children in our autism sample, we gave an ADOS, so all the diagnoses were confirmed. And I will be using some of those scores later in my analyses. All right, here's the battery that Emily and I came up with. First of all, I felt that one of the shortcomings of some of the other studies was not assessing reading comprehension very well. And as I started going through all the different assessments for reading comprehension, I found something I didn't like about each one. So we went for we went for a combination to try to get a better picture of how the kids were doing. So the Gray Oral Reading Test, or the GORT, is a standardized measure, and they're given it quite a few passages to read and find basal and ceiling, and it gives you both standard scores and grade equivalent scores. And then the qualitative reading inventory, or the QRI, is a lot more like what you would see given in a classroom. The passages are more similar, and you get different kinds of information from it because you can actually understand how they're doing on direct recall or explicit questions versus questions that require inference and global processing that they call implicit question types. So it gives us a little more qualitative data. All right, so then we did decide that it was very important to look at word reading, decoding, and text reading accuracy. Okay, lots of language measures. I really wanted to understand more about language because, as I mentioned earlier, some of the clues that we had from those early studies was that language in particular is a huge thing to consider when you're trying to understand why things are going wrong or poorly. So we actually have two measures of phonological processing, but the one I'm going to use in the analyses today is an expressive phonology task. Then we have recalling sentences, which taps memory and also the ability to use syntactical structures to recall increasingly longer sentences. We have vocabulary and a derivational morphology task. So if I give you the word farm and I ask you to complete this sentence, my uncle was a farmer, you have to add the suffix. And so they have, I think it's 26, 28. I have a colleague in the audience. Anyway, some are much more difficult than others, but that was a very interesting measure. And then we have the higher order language and cognitive measures, because, and you know, you could go on and on. There are many more things that you would always love to look at, but I narrowed it down to an auditory processing, or auditory reasoning and inference measure, just in global processing measure that's just at the sentence level, and a narrative structure and recall task. Okay. So I'll walk you through this table. So the GORT, the standardized measure, if you have a scale score of 10, that's average. So you can see the typically developing samples right at average. And a standard deviation of 3 is normal, so that means that most of the sample was between the score of a 7 and a 13. For the children with high-functioning autism, they were 7.4, so their average score was about 1 standard deviation below. But again, you know, standard scores are interesting and group means are interesting, but that's not all the information we want. I just wanted you, however, to see that we do indeed have a reading comprehension issue in the sample. The QRI, the more qualitative one, these scores are the percent of the questions that they got correct. So in the typically developing sample, they're doing pretty well. About 84% of the questions were correct. High-functioning autism, about 65%. But here's where it's really interesting, I think. So the direct recall, explicit, literal, they're actually not that much different. I mean, there is a statistical significance, but in general, a lot of the kids are doing just fine with this. Probably not a big surprise. It's the implicit or inferential question types where the main problem lies. And then you can see down here, I think if you recall, I said some of those early studies showed anywhere between 33 and 65% of their samples having a comprehension problem. Of course, it depends how you define a comprehension problem. So I just picked at least 1 standard deviation below average, and that puts 51% of our sample at that level. And we'll talk a little bit more about nuances here in a minute. Here's a different way to look at it, and this actually follows up on something that Emily mentioned earlier about increasing gaps over time. And so let me walk you through this. On the side, we have, so 0 means you're performing at grade level. This is on the standardized comprehension measure. I split the sample up into a younger group of kids. So orange, they're between 8 and 11. And then blue, they're between 12 and 16. And so this is cross-sectional. I want to emphasize that. We're going to be looking at the longitudinal data in the spring. But cross-sectionally in the autism sample, the younger kids are about 1 1/3 years below grade level. The older kids are about 2.5 years below grade level. And then the typically developing sample on the far right, the younger kids are basically at grade level, and in fact, our older kids in that sample are doing quite well. This is the only appearance of the ADHD group in my slides. I forgot to take this one out, but it may be interesting for people working in education. They are behind and kind of stay behind, but the gap doesn't widen, at least cross-sectionally. Okay, so for my dissertation, I wanted to test a particular model of factors and how those factors related to one another. So here we have the comprehension. Okay, so the two parts of the simple model, oral language and reading accuracy, they should both be predicting. So when I'm saying predicting, I mean statistically, they should be related to the comprehension scores, right? And they should also be related to one another, because as we've talked about before, the reading accuracy, especially decoding, is dependent on your phonological processing. Now let's also bring back in the idea of social communication. And so I'm using the word social phenotype, but that's a stand-in for just the idea of social communication. That should be relating to comprehension, we think, because we saw group differences in that. So maybe just having something about having the diagnosis, the way that you develop so that you've got this diagnosis, maybe that's just specifically related to comprehension. But maybe it's also related to how your oral language developed. We already talked about that a little bit. And what if it's also related to your reading accuracy? So we'll test all those. So, first thing I did was just look directly at the relationship between your autism symptomatology, which in this case was your ADOS total score, and your reading comprehension. And I mentioned that the technique that I'm using is called structural equation modeling. And so I took it out to make the slides easier to read, but reading comprehension is the combination of both of the score on both their GORT and their QRI. Okay, so it's what we call latent variables. So we've combined how they did on both of those variables. So it's a negative association. So the more symptoms you have of autism, so the higher your ADOS score, the lower your reading comprehension score. Okay. So there's also a strong, significant negative relation in our sample between your ADOS score and your structural language. So remember, that's the vocabulary, morphology, phonology, syntax. So those are all bundled in this structural language variable. So their performance on all of those. There's extremely strong and significant relationship between their structural language ability and their comprehension. So right now, we would say, okay, so how severe your symptoms are is impacting your language development and therefore comprehension, but there's still something that's not explained. This is still a significant path. Interestingly and surprisingly at first, that your ADOS scores also significantly predicted how well you did with decoding and word reading and text reading. The other thing that's interesting is there is no arrow here. So that's not an omission. There was actually no significant relationship between how well the children were decoding and sight word reading, and their comprehension. And when we look at subgroups in a few minutes, you'll see why. But there's, as Dr. Solari mentioned, the original thinking was most of the children had pretty good decoding and word reading. In fact, some of them show really early special interest in kind of cracking that code, but it's not contributing to the comprehension. And their structural language ability also is very significantly related to their word reading ability. I've added something into the model that now no longer, we now no longer have this direct relationship, and that is I added in the higher order language variables. So now this orange circle encompasses all the tests that we gave of structural language and all the tests that we gave of the higher order language. So when we added those in, this no longer became a direct path. So now what we're seeing is that having more characteristics of autism is really impacting all these language variables, and that is what is driving their reading comprehension problems. And so then also directly and indirectly, it's impacting their reading accuracy. And that's something that actually we did not expect, because this is a negative association. So having higher levels of ASD characteristics is actually creating lower word reading abilities. That kind of goes against what we thought with, that this should be something connected to a restricted interest. All right, here's our subgroups. So I don't want to bore you with statistics, but we use something called latent class analysis. So when you look at these labels, a lot went into that. We looked at we picked out the tests that we thought were the most interesting for classroom teachers. So word reading and decoding, phonological, expressive phonology, text reading accuracy, most of the structural language variables, all the higher order language variables, and the comprehension variables. And you throw it all into this fabulous computer program and wave your wand. And we were able to find very specific subgroups within the sample where they had a similar profile, like they did well or poorly in the same kind of pattern on all these different variables. So the first one, there is indeed a group of kids who appear to have a hyperlexic profile. They are actually the lowest on everything except decoding. So they have extremely poor oral language skills, extremely poor comprehension, structural language. Even their sight word reading's not that great, but they did very well on the decoding test. They also have the highest ADOS scores. Okay, next, here's our the clear poor comprehender group. So they did poorly on the higher order language and reading comprehension measures. They were kind of in the middle on some of the structural language measures, and they did quite well on the reading and decoding. So both of these groups have some things in common in terms of having some strengths, and they may present somewhat similarly in the classroom, okay? If you're just, as a teacher, assessing decoding skills in those early years, they might fool you. Okay, then we have the garden variety poor readers, about 22% of the sample. So they're really struggling in every area. Here's some dysfluent readers. These are actually, on average, the youngest readers, or some of the younger readers in the sample. So right now, their comprehension actually doesn't look bad, but they're having some trouble that might later become a stumbling block as they get older, if they can't become more fluent. But that's something we can certainly intervene with. And then about 23% of the sample looks great. So that's wonderful. And so we go from having the highest characteristics of autism, and it just, as you go around, it goes down. And these guys are the lowest. And there's a significant difference in their ADOS scores between the hyperlexic group and the good reader group. Okay, so 2 things to just kind of summarize that work. I would like you to just think about the fact that the social communication difficulties of ASD place these children at risk for difficulties with oral and so structural language and higher order language and cognitive skills, which then in turn impact their reading development. Secondly, then, targeting specific aspects of oral language for intervention is particularly important for this group of kids.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about my development work. So I think this slide is really important. When I first saw this part of her dissertation, I was like, well, first of all, that's a paper in itself, because that has never been shown in this particular population. And for us to assume that all these kids have comprehension difficulties is really not what's happening here. We have some kids who are apparently are just, so we have all different types of kids. And so when we started looking this summer at adapting our intervention, we thought, well, it's not just comprehension we need to intervene in. We have to intervene in a bunch of different ways. And on top of that, the assessment piece is really important for this group, because these poor comprehenders would be the kids who I referred to earlier. People call them the late emerging reading comprehension issues. So if you were to assess them early, you would see that they might be, you might not catch them till later for the comprehension piece. So I'm going to talk a little bit about work that I did previously, and then I'm going to let Nancy talk about her work, about our work in with the actual kids with autism. So our pilot study is we're implementing right now. Did we finish? We finish next week. A 4-week, basically a pilot. So we're taking some work that I had funded by the U.S. Department of Education to develop for kids who are struggling readers. And we're using that. It's a comprehension intervention, and we're working with 8 to 10-year-olds. And we have students paired on their comprehension ability. We're starting to implement this. And it's a lot of stuff there's a lot of vocabulary development and comprehension skills. And we also have a secondary goal of enhancing social interaction and engagement. Because as Nancy showed in her data, there's some social stuff going on here, and reading is reading is sort of a social skill, and so we're really interested in how we can develop social relationships even between the students in the intervention groups. So we're doing some data collection, including cognitive measures, a pretty extensive reading battery for a 4-week study, just because I can't help myself. I have to collect data on everything. That includes fluency, decoding, listening comprehension, reading comprehension, and narrative generation. And what that means is we basically give kids a book that doesn't have any text, and we ask them to tell us a story by looking at the pictures. And then we have some parent questionnaires parent questionnaires, and then we have about metacognitive reading strategies, about reading interest, and ADHD and ASD symptomatology. So the reading questionnaires basically they ask the parents about, and the kids about how often they go to the library, whether they like books and stuff like that. Because I think that one of our concerns coming in was that some of these kids are so frustrated with reading that they may hate reading. I meet kids in the schools who have been getting reading intervention for years, and they're so frustrated with reading because it's not working for them. And whatever intervention they're receiving is not working for them, and they become very, very frustrated. And I think just hearing from Nancy and Matt about the kids that are coming in, there are some that shut down when you ask them to read because they're very, very frustrated. And then a little bit about our sequence of comprehension skill development. So this again came out of the U.S. Department of Education funded grants. And when I started that project, I sat down and I looked through the literature. We had been funded to develop a scope and sequence for reading comprehension or listening comprehension. But it turned out that there wasn't much out there, and I knew this going into the project, that sort of thought about comprehension as a sequence of events that builds on each other. And a lot of the general ed curriculums that are out right now, they do, okay, today we're going to do summarizing. Tomorrow we're going to do inferencing. Then we're going to do asking questions the next day. And it's very choppy. And kids are never taught to mastery on anything. And so that was a concern for me. And so when I sat down to think about this with a group of people, we thought, well, what do you need to start, and how do you build comprehension? And we knew that this always doesn't function in this way. In fact, it probably functions in this way. Like, all these things are happening at once, right? But you do need some basic skills in order to move on. So you have to be able to take a text, and if I read that Sally went to the grocery store and I ask, where did Sally go? You have to be able to tell me that she went to the grocery store before you can move on to more complex skills like inferencing, right? So if that basic skill is not there, it's really hard to move up this sort of scope and sequence that we developed. And it's not linear. I'm not kidding myself that this is a linear process. But there are certain things that you need. You need to be able to know how to use your background knowledge in making connections to be able then to use that knowledge to make inferences, right? So there are certain things that we teach in order, and we teach to mastery. That's something else that's really important. We teach for 2 or 3 weeks for each thing, and for each skill, and we want to make sure that they know that skill before they move on to the next thing.
Okay. So it's been a fabulous 3 weeks that we've been working with the kids now, and honestly, I feel like I've learned more in 3 weeks than 2 years while I was working in a more kind of assess and then bring the next one in kind of situation, because I have really gotten to know these children, and I got to do their pre-testing, which is what I had been also doing in our other study, but then I get to see them 4 mornings a week for an hour with some very special parents that are willing to drive to Davis 4 mornings a week for 4 weeks, and I've just watched them unfold. And we decided at first to just work with them in pairs, because we really weren't sure how to best facilitate that social interaction between the 2 kids with us and with the book. So, Dr. Mundy's work is, for those of you who know him, he works in joint attention, and the idea of joint engagement or joint attention becomes so critical when you're talking about instruction. And it becomes, even just with the 2 kids and the teacher, and we have an undergrad RA that helps us out too, it's a very dynamic process, and we have different things happening in the different groups and based on the personalities of the kids. And just a little anecdote, the very first day, I was kind of getting things ready, and the RA, one of the things that they help us with is just getting the parents' parking passes and then bringing the children up. And so it was nice and quiet in the School of Ed where we're working this summer. And all of a sudden, I know that they're in the building because I hear a little voice screaming, "I hate reading. I'm not doing this." It's like, oh boy. So, however, I'm happy to say that once that person was in and settled, and his partner was looking rather shell-shocked for the first 5 minutes, but we got them settled down. I've worked with lots of kids over the years in classroom settings, and a mom, so all these things help, right? We got them settled down, and the first thing we did was we said, okay, so we're going to be all working together in here, and we know that for a lot of people, reading is difficult, and so you don't want to do it. However, it can actually be fun, and so we're going to try to work together in order to learn about how reading can be fun. And the first thing we need to do, though, is, any teacher, we need to make some rules. And I wanted the kids to come up with the rules, but I really wasn't sure what they were going to be. And the crier, first rule was no crying. And then they went on from there, and there were the different groups came up with different kinds of things, but they must have been listening because they did say have fun. And we go over the rules every day when they come in. You know, we've tried to create some predictability when we work with the children. So, for instance, we have daily agendas. So every day, Matt and I create an agenda that has a room. I mean, just basic, right? Just a little place to put a sticker next to it. So the first thing is you go over the rules. So for the second day, the little boy came in that had been crying the first day, came in happy, and he sat down and he said, all right, let's go over the rules. And so, you know, we start with that every time, and we always emphasize different aspects of the rules. But, you know, I was surprised. That's the only behavior management system we actually have in place, just creating that predictability in the group. And so the next thing is usually that we'll be reviewing something that we learned before and that kind of thing. But those agendas have helped quite a bit. I thought we were going to have to do a lot more, and certainly I know that a small pilot study is not everything, but it has helped a lot. One of the parts of the curriculum is turn and talk. So often as you're teaching a skill, you'll have the children brainstorm and turn to a partner and talk about your ideas. And that's, the group that I work with has a lot of trouble with that. The group that Matt works with does not have as much difficulty with that. But one thing in terms of tips or strategies, I find if we have them write their ideas down first, then they can turn and talk. So there's certain things that seem to be facilitating the social interaction piece. And, you know, it's variable from minute to minute in there. And I think we had a meeting the other day, and we talked about how long does it take to get through a lesson. And Dr. Solari said it should take 20 to 30 minutes. I said, well, gosh, it's taking us closer to 30 or 40. And that is partly because for every minute that you are actually having some moment of connection between the two kids or between the children and you and around the book, you have a minute or so of time where one child's withdrawn, the other child is very distractible, and they're talking about, you know, they've activated some kind of prior knowledge that's not relevant at all to the book, but it's, you know, created some kind of thing that you need to bring them back together. So even just working in pairs, we're learning a lot about pacing and structure. The other thing that is part of the curriculum is actually the first thing on there. When I first was reading about it, I thought, I don't know if this is going to work. There's a gesture that is associated with each comprehension skill. And the first gesture for direct recall is to show that you, like, how did you know that Mary went to the store? Because I heard it right in the book. And it took, for my group, it took longer than for Matt's group, but they've learned to use the gesture, which is fabulous. I think it really does help reinforce. It's just that it's not an automatic thing that you might see with other kids. The next one that we just introduced this week is understanding what you already know, so your background knowledge. And so then when you read a book, you might read a book about two girls that are playing on the playground at recess, and that might remind you of something that you like to do on the playground and that kind of thing. So those kinds of things, like the hand signals, are actually effective with the kids. We also do a lot with vocabulary. The curriculum is wonderful for vocabulary development because they encounter the words in the text first. We read these really great, well-chosen children's books. So we are reading to them, so there's no, if a child has decoding problems, it's not interfering with their participation. So we're reading, they encounter the new words within the text. Then at the end, the vocabulary is explicitly discussed, and they have different activities around them. And we also have them create a vocabulary log where they write the new word, and then they can, if they have trouble writing, they can draw a picture, that kind of thing. But anyway, just, I guess my point with this is a lot of reinforcement. So the structure of the curriculum is fantastic. And so far we're finding, however, in terms of the way people learn and managing the group setting are two really big considerations.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was created in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other brain disorders are helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.